Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Soch Phir Post. I'm really excited about today's episode because we are joined by a former student of IBA who has done a research on women's online participation and how this information ecosystem that we're all a part of now has sort of changed over time and how that impacts women generally. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Sir Shazib. It feels nice to come back.
Sir, I'm a knight now. Sana, I just want to, before we start sort of talking about your studies, want to read out an excerpt that really sort of touched me. It gave like goosebumps to me when I read it from part of your thesis. And the excerpt went like this. I dedicate this research to all the women out there who have been made to feel small, used or abused, to all the young girls who have lost something along life's journey, and to every woman who hesitates before posting a selfie. To every woman who has felt like life is on the brink because of a picture, a video, or a message. This is for those who navigate the digital world with courage despite the challenges. This is for me, for you, for all of you. So, a really powerful message. But how did you come about with this idea of taking up this issue for your thesis? I'm sure you had your own personal experiences, but what motivated you?
So, being a user of Instagram since the age of 12, I've had to constantly navigate my own digital identity to see what falls into what is appropriate as a woman. And then what I can do to make sure that my information is not misused in any way. I've also had peers and friends around me that have become victims of image-based violence. This is a big part of women in Pakistan and how they get impacted if any of their personal information is leaked, if any of their personal information is misused. I think throughout my social media use on Instagram and Facebook, unsolicited messages, being poked or being constantly stalked or harassed on Instagram is a very common found experience. And this is something that you will find unanimously across all sorts of ages, across all sorts of income groups. And then when I was thinking about my thesis, I wanted to think about what is it that irks me about today's world? What is it that hinders me from being who I am, from expressing who I am, John Perry Barlow, one of these very, influential writers who has talked about the Declaration of Independence of cyberspace, he talks about the promise of the digital world, right? He talks about the fact that the digital world and social media is supposed to be about interactivity, inclusivity. But throughout my years of usage and with my peers and their experiences, the discussions I've had, very candid discussions, even before my thesis research began, was all about, okay, if I am posting this, will I be perceived a certain way? If I am posting this, my chacha sees this and my taya sees this, so what will he think? There are these nuances there, and I think that is what motivated me to look into this. And especially, I think there's a lot of global research that's been done on this. But when it comes to Pakistan, there is that missing link, especially in developing countries, to understand how our cultural issues affect the online context.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, this brings me to my conversations with my wife. Every time we go out and she's wearing something sleeveless, perhaps.
Yeah.
She's like, "Don't post this picture because the family may see it on your
Absolutely.
public Instagram profile."
Yeah.
And a lot of women I know also have, they don't have public profiles on Instagram or Facebook, right? They do have some privacy filters, but and generally, according to research, according to the data we have, hardly 1 out of 5 account holders on these major social media platforms like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Instagram is slightly higher, but generally it's 1 out of 5 of them would be women.
Yeah.
Why do you think this ratio is so skewed? I mean, our population is almost 50% women, right? The last census, it says it's about 48.5% there's women in this country. So why is the population on social media platforms so skewed? What are the impediments for women's online participation on these platforms?
So initially, when I started researching, I myself did not know that there was such a difference when it comes to male accounts and female accounts, right? So 2023 में एक study हुई थी, and it revealed that about 64% of male accounts are on Instagram and female accounts are around 40%, right? Now that difference has a lot of reasons. I think the first and foremost reason, especially when we're talking about the lower socioeconomic strata, there is a pressure from the family side to not participate socially, to not be that socially visible, to not post pictures, to not engage with content, to not have a social media identity that can be recognizable in any way within that community or otherwise. Right? So I think that is one of the major aspects. And then the other aspect that I realized later when I had my focus group discussions was that a lot of these women make their accounts and actually are not well equipped with the technology itself, right? So they do not know the user rights that they're given through that platform, which is why they might have an account. Even the 40% that we're talking about, I can tell you for sure that about 15% of those accounts are accounts that do not have a profile picture, that do not have any kind of engaging content. The profile might be there,
So
but that
anonymized,
portion,
basically.
yeah, absolutely. So I think those are the reasons. And then more than that, the societal pressure, because we know that we do belong from a patriarchal society. There is no ifs and buts about it. This is just one of those facts that, like globally, this is becoming a trend. And I think social media is now becoming a tool through which patriarchy is, being pushed forward. So women are pushed out of the public sphere. Like अगर आप market में भी जाते हैं, ठीक है, कराची को आप छोड़ दें, लाहौर को आप छोड़ दें, I'm talking about remote locations. You go to into a public space, how many women do you see out there? Not many.
I mean, I think कराची और लाहौर की मार्केट में भी जाएं तो ogling और harassment जो आपको online spaces में
But they will still be there. वो फिर
Right.
भी अपनी खरीदारी करी होंगी. But if you take northern areas, for example, मानसेरा हो गया, जो भी remote locations हैं, वहाँ पे even the offline public sphere, women are not welcomed in it.
Right.
So that same kind of inequality is then, mirrored in the online context as well.
So now, about societal pressure, आपने जो mentioned किया, one of the cases that you use in your thesis is the Kohistan honor killings, and it's sort of symbolic, and that happened in 2011. But उसके बाद हमने बहुत सारे ऐसे cases देखे हैं. But can you briefly talk about what happened in that case, and how that sort of epitomizes how society deals with notions of honor and how it translates to online and then violence offline.
So the Kohistan case was such that there was a group of 5 women and they were singing, clapping at a wedding. There was a male involved in that event and he recorded that video and leaked it within the community. When the rest of the community got wind of it, it was not in line with the modesty values that are placed upon those women. A lot of those women are women who observe niqab, who observe parda. And once this video was released to the community leaders or the local jirga, they gave a statement that these 3 women must be killed. And these 3 women were then honor killed in 2012. Ab jaake, I think 2 years back, the male that leaked that video has gotten imprisonment.
And I think the first time the court actually took up this case was in 2018.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
तो इतना बड़ा gap, which is what we've seen in a lot of these cases where when women are the receiving end of, harassment, even forget violence, forget honor killings, even harassment, cyberbullying,
Yeah.
they have little to no recourse to, any sort of legal system that they can have faith in कि उनके मसाइल हल करे.
Bilkul.
Right?
Absolutely.
How was your experience when you were talking to women? Let's sort of circle back and can you sort of explain how you went about doing your research, methodology क्या थी आपकी, and then we move on to that part.
So when I wanted to look into this, I wanted to understand basically how women navigate their privacy online and how it differs from different socioeconomic statuses, right? So I wanted to conduct a focus group of a total of 26 participants, which I then proceeded to divide into 3 categories. The higher income group, these were colleagues of a marketing agency that I had a very open conversation with. The second middle income group were students of a secondary high school. So we're talking about an age group of 18 to 19. And then the third was the most interesting one. It was the lower income group where I went to a local parlor in my community and had a conversation with the girls that work at the parlor. My specific choice of that, so my supervisor really was like, why do you want to, do a focus group in a parlor? And I think the choice was very deliberate in the way that, number one, this was a complete safe space for these women because they work there. Number two, I needed to have access to users who might not have as much knowledge about the platforms but are still active on them.
Sure.
Right? So these were the 3 focus groups that I focused on. I proceeded to gain my consent, gain their consent, sit with them, have an open conversation. Because it was a focus group, there was no cross questioning. It was mostly just prompts and an open discussion. One of the major findings that I found in relation to what you just mentioned across all three groups was that despite facing privacy breaches, despite facing cyber harassment, not once, multiple times, as these users mentioned, not a single one of them went to the authorities, whether it was cybercrime, whether it was FIA. So these sort of things really are telling of whether or not these women would choose to ignore it. These women would choose to maybe report that account to some extent, or these women would choose to tell a person, or these women would choose to reduce the social cues that they have, right? So one very common strategy that I found, especially in my middle and my lower income groups, was that when they faced a privacy breach, they removed their profile picture. Right, they stopped interacting on social media, profile deactivate kar di. And one case where the scandal was such that it then affected her offline life, she stopped coming to school. She stopped coming for school for about 2 months because she was so embarrassed of what had happened. A picture of her dancing at a farewell video where it was an all girls event, somebody from the staff leaked that video on a public profile and tagged her account. Right. So we are talking about real people here.
We're talking about an 18-year-old.
We're talking about an 18-year-old.
Dancing at all girls event.
Absolutely.
And he video share कर दी एक staff member ने, and that's how it sort of translated offline, जहाँ पे she couldn't face all her colleagues,
She couldn't come back to school, right? Like, उसका learning loss भी वहाँ पे involved है.
Absolutely. But Sana, you mentioned some of these women who spoke to you, they talked about how, they would anonymize their profiles or they would remove their profile pictures. But honestly, जब इस तरह के cases होते हैं, there are avenues for legal recourse, right? हमारे कानून हैं, हमारी authorities हैं. Why aren't women accessing those avenues? Why aren't women approaching the law enforcers अगर उनके साथ इस तरह के कोई हादसात हो रहे हैं?
So before I answer that question, I'd like to tell you about a case that happened in 2017. This is the case of Naila Rind, and she was a university student in the University of Sindh, right? And she was being blackmailed by a professor in the same university to get into an illicit relationship with her, and she was being blackmailed with her personal sexually explicit content for about 3 months. She did go to the relevant authorities. She contacted them. There was such a delay in their response, and the psychological harm and the reputational harm that Naila kept thinking about and pondering about resulted in the loss of her life. She committed suicide after being blackmailed by her professor for 3 months, right? So we are talking about a delay.
उस professor को अभी सजा हुई.
Ji, like 2026. Yeah. It took about 6-7 years. And of course, the professor was asked to give compensation money to the family, which is so ironic because the life that had to be lost was lost. The action that had to be taken was not taken. It was an open and shut case. The evidence was there. There was a call log. There was an email chain. There was concrete evidence for this professor to be sentenced within those 3 months or even after. But it took about 6 to 7 years for that case to actually conclude, right? So the issue isn't कि हमारे laws नहीं हैं. The issue is कि हमारी processing जब इतनी slow होगी and it takes about 6 to 7 years for one case to conclude, then no woman wants to, like, वो घनचक्कर नहीं बन सकती इस process में, वो इस system का हिस्सा ही नहीं बनना चाहती, because at the end of the day, who is facing the reputational harm? It's her. It's Naila Rind's name that I remember actually. I don't even remember the professor's name. That's the irony. That is the bias that we as a nation have. That despite the fact that she was the victim, she still faced that reputational damage. So I think in the focus groups that I conducted and all the peers that I've had conversations with, this is the major problem. ठीक है, मैं चली जाऊँ, मैं FIA के पास चली जाऊँ, मैं साइबर क्राइम में रिपोर्ट कर दूँ. There is no gender sensitivity training that is given to these officials to ask the right questions, to ask in the right way, to ask in a way that I am able to divulge information. Rather, we are asked or questioned in a way that we would end up, and that conversation would end up turning a little victim blamey, where we'd be like, okay, maybe it was my fault that I replied. It was my fault that I didn't block him instantly. So I think those sort of things really deter women from going to the authorities. This was a pattern that I found across all of my users. I wouldn't go to the authorities if I faced something like that. And I have faced issues. There is a reason I did this research. It's because I have faced these issues throughout my life, and yet I have never gone to the authorities just because of this fear. And then more than that, like I said, online and offline are connected. As a girl, I have never been encouraged कि मैं थाने जाऊँ, कि मैं थाने के चक्कर लगाऊँ. right? So then don't you think that same sort of a thing applies here?
I think absolutely, and I think when we look at the rhetoric, जब आपके political leaders भी आपस में, when there's a woman who is a public figure, she's in the public sort of spotlight, and उनके बारे में जिस तरह का rhetoric होता है, I think it sort of normalizes this behavior in society, and I think वो offline से फिर online हमें वही mirror like you pointed out दिखता है. But I do want to bring it back to sort of your focus groups. So what were your key findings? एक तो आपने कहा familial pressures होते हैं, एक तो silent pressures होते हैं. But then what about the disinformation campaigns? We've seen a lot of those in Pakistan. Abhi recently, we've noticed online famous TikTok influencers के leaked videos बहुत सामने आ रहे हैं, right? So how much of that influences women's decisions when you're thinking about online participation?
I think in my lower and my middle income groups, I saw the fear of misuse being a very real thing, which is why they completely anonymize their profiles, right? So, one key finding was that their about page will either be infiltrated with false information or with very minimal information. If they post pictures, it will be a picture of a flower, it will be a picture of a book, it will not be a picture of their face. If their face is shown, only the eyes are visible. And when prompted upon why, it was a very simple answer. It was that I know that my pictures can be misused. And also, like I said, that it is also, you could say their brothers or their fathers or their mothers that have told them that, if you post this picture, it will be misused somehow. And they have seen cases around, they have used other, so a lot of the focus group participants also talked about their other friends who have faced this, right? So another aspect of the fear of misuse in these focus group participants was that since they do not know about the basic features such as Facebook profile lock, right? So this was a common theme that I found in my lower income group, in my middle income group, that they do not know how to use the platform settings that are available to them, which is why they are afraid that if they post any picture, it is going to be misused.
Interesting. And how does that sort of deviate? Yeah, how does that compare when you took 3 focus groups and they were divided along socioeconomic status, right? So how did the knowledge of these platforms, or how did the confidence to be online or visible vary across these socioeconomic groups?
So in my higher income group, I was talking to people who were already very, you could say, well versed in the media world, right? So I'm talking to people who work in a marketing agency who already spend 10 plus hours on Instagram, on Facebook. So these are people who are well versed about the privacy settings. They told me very clearly that, okay, we don't add unknowns, we don't add anybody who we do not know from the offline context. We don't just make friends online. More than that, a lot of them had their private accounts. So out of 26 participants, 24 of them had a private account. 2 of them did not know that there is a private public difference. And in the higher income group, most of them would have their profile lock, would have, their certain relatives on restrict. So I think, and then the difference in the middle income and the lower income was that they would use alternative privacy strategies. Now, this was defined as a researcher by a researcher as called the digital parda, right? So the idea is that you are there, but you're not there, right? So these users again would only post or repost videos, or they would repost memes, but they wouldn't post any of their own content. This was a common theme that I found between my middle income and my lower income. And then one thing that I realized in my lower income is that they genuinely do not understand how the algorithm works at all, right? So they use these platforms as content consumption. There is no content creation that takes place. There is no interaction. So then, as you would say, from Facebook's end, these are accounts that are on the other end, जो probably recognize भी नहीं होते होंगे, recognize होते होंगे, but बिल्कुल भी active नहीं show रहे होते.
Right. Very interesting terminology, digital parda. But we've seen अब generative AI का ज़माना है, and how do you think digital parda will fare in the age of generative AI, where you have concerns about your identities being forged, videos being manipulated? आपकी अगर कोई एक भी तस्वीर है, उसको कोई use करके they can easily create deepfakes. So how, and is that going to discourage women's online participation more, because everything's going to be very easy to manipulate now? So
Yeah.
what's the feeling? What's you as someone who's done this research? What's your feeling about generative AI now?
I think it's the most dangerous thing that could happen to women out there, if I'm being honest. Um, so AI technology has become so sophisticated that even if you have a limited digital footprint now, one picture can be used to completely, you could say, loss of face. It can result in a complete loss of face. So one case that recently happened, Cutie Cinderella is a streamer on Twitch, and she goes by the username Cutie Cinderella, and she's been a streamer for a lot of years.
And she's US based, I mean.
And she's US based, yes. And one of her colleagues was actually live streaming, and their fans saw a tab that was open, which was about deepfakes. And he was actually the one making Cutie Cinderella's deepfakes. Cutie Cinderella then went on to search herself on Google and Twitter, where she found an abundance of deepfake videos that were made of her.
And she didn't know about it.
And she was not informed about it by that colleague. Instead, she found out through the internet. The most dangerous thing about deepfake videos is that there is no way to completely remove it. Once it is out there, it is out there. There
As
is
with
no...
any digital content,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. But I think with AI, it becomes even more dangerous because you cannot find out कि वो actually originate कहाँ से हुआ है, right? So then there's this concept of virality जो deepfake videos में बहुत extreme है, right? So we have these silos in Twitter where these deepfake videos are being exchanged, being sold, and it's become very common practice, and it's actually monetized. Then Cutie Cinderella proceeded to sue the content creator who did this and also get to the bottom of it. And then she went out to the public and actually told everybody that there is no legality, there is no law in the US that criminalizes this as an offense yet. Because AI is such an up and coming field, हम अपनी, like, it's so interesting that in my workplace we're like, oh, हम AI को कैसे integrate करें? AI is seen as a positive thing, कि ChatGPT आपने कर लिया, and we don't understand that AI has now completely shifted what the truth is. And then Cutie Cinderella then proceeded to talk about the body dysmorphia that she faced. She said, my body does not look like that. You have edited my face on a body, and my body does not look like that at all. The loss of reputation, the psychological harm she then proceeded to face, and the case is still ongoing, by the way. A similar case emerged in Britain, in the UK, and we have these cases now coming up globally where deep fakes are becoming a very big part of gendered disinformation, right? So disinformation के बहुत सारे aspects हैं. It becomes very dangerous when it's targeted to an already vulnerable population. उसके भी you could say दो पहलू हैं, right? So it can either be a woman who is in the position of power, जिसकी वो influence कम करने के लिए that disinformation is spread, or it could be just a scorned lover who, in the form of revenge porn, is trying to take.
And we've seen cases these latter,
absolutely,
or both types in Pakistan.
Yeah,
quite a bit.
Absolutely. So I think it's becoming an increasingly dangerous world out there, and we as users, especially as female users who are already not equipped with the kind of digital literacy that we should be, right? We do not know, or we do not understand the implications that AI can have.
So now, one of the things that you referred to in your thesis is this idea of culturally nuanced privacy regulations. Can you elaborate on these? What do you mean by this?
So I started off by defining privacy and how the beginning of privacy and the beginning of the definition of privacy was by Irvin Ortman in 1975. And he talked about how it is generally about boundary regulation, right? So who am I allowing in my ITC space, and who am I allowing in the space beyond that? Now, in the age of social media, the concept of privacy has completely shifted, right? So when you are interacting with social media, you're constantly negotiating self-disclosure and privacy to be able to interact with that tool.
Interesting.
Right? So another aspect of privacy that I highlighted was that privacy itself has become a luxury commodity, right? So if I'm not digitally literate in the platform, then I do not know how to keep myself safe. And this was again a finding in my focus group as well. When I'm talking about culturally nuanced privacy regulations, I am talking about the big guys, right? So when we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Instagram. These are creators who are sitting in Silicon Valley and have made regulations based off of their understanding of Pakistan or India or Bangladesh. However, they have not involved any local stakeholders when it comes to these community guidelines. So a lot of the times, हमारी language में अगर किसी लड़की को गाली दी जा रही है, it is not even flagged on Facebook because it is not something that's part of the algorithm.
या मुहावरे यूज होते हैं
बिल्कुल, absolutely.
राइट एंड कल्चरल होते हैं ऑल्सो इट्स नॉट जस्ट के पाकिस्तान का भी एक होमोजेनस कल्चर तो नहीं है ना someone in Karachi would have a different idea of privacy than someone in Mansehra, for instance.
Absolutely.
Right? So it really depends on the socio-cultural context of where that person is located and, you know, perhaps the family they belong to also. Because Karachi may be homogeneous culture नहीं है. Karachi में भी different ethnicities रहती हैं, different conservative, left, right, हर तरह के लोग रहते हैं. तो, you know, you're absolutely right. But how do you come about this? You know, you posit this idea, but what needs to be done here? Does it need to be done at the state level? Does it need to be done at the regulators level? जो platform level? कहाँ पे? Where does this come about?
I think first of all, it needs to come about from the users level as well, holding these platforms accountable and critically engaging with them. You are not just making an account. It is not just about making Facebook friends anymore. You critically engage with that platform and hold Meta accountable for the ways that they have. So we know that they trade data, right? We know that our data is being tracked. We know it's being sold. We know it's being traded. That is just one aspect of it. But we also know that it is this same tool that promised inequality that has now become the same tool for oppression, right? So the idea is that it cannot just be done at a state level. It needs to come from those platforms as well. They need to take in the opinions of local stakeholders. They need to involve specifically vulnerable populations, right? So I'm not just talking about women here. We know we have religious ethnicities in Pakistan who are consistently targeted, consistently harassed, and those words and those languages are not flagged on Facebook. So at least start with that. Start with flagging language. Start with understanding कि okay, like English में अगर ये word नहीं इस्तेमाल हो रहा है, उर्दू में ये हो रहा है, तो इसके क्या मतलब है, इसका क्या cultural context है, right? So I think we start with that, and then we take it forward. And then, of course, if it's being done from the platform level, it then needs to be taken seriously from the state level, right? अभी तो हमारी, as we discussed, के implementation पे ही हम इतना काम कर रहे हैं कि we don't understand how these platforms are affecting our population, how they're affecting our vulnerable populations as well. So to be able to have some sort of a harmony between the state and between these platforms, to be able to have some kind of a collaboration, have an open dialogue to see what impacts us. What impacts us may not impact a user in US, right? It is a completely different conversation. So that needs to be taken into account.
Thank you so much, Sana. I think you're absolutely right. It starts with us, and we're the users that need to educate ourselves. We're the users who need to sort of hold these platforms and our authorities accountable. जब हमारे साथ कुछ गलत होता है, I think we will leave the audience with that, with the idea that जो कुछ भी पोस्ट करना है, जो कुछ भी आपने अपने आप को एक्सपोज करना है डिजिटल प्लेटफॉर्म्स पे, अल्टीमेटली द बक स्टॉप्स विथ यू, राइट? यू आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द कंटेंट यू आर क्रिएटिंग, यू आर रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द कंटेंट यू आर कंज्यूमिंग, बट उससे आगे interacting with these platforms in a manner that is constructive but also doesn't harm other people and don't allow yourself to be harmed.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sana, for being
Thank
with
you
us,
so much.
and good luck with future research.
Thank you.